r/AskReddit by Reddify. Have you ever witnessed someone completely snap? What happened? Back in middle school I remember there was this kid who got bullied, and one day he punched the bully. They both went down and started wailing on each other. The kid got his ass kicked, but he didn't get bullied again after that day. HS sophomore year. I had a really bad day. I just got out of gym and saw that someone had jacked my clothes out of my locker, ripping the lock off in the process and rendering it useless. Tossed them in the urinal and pissed all over them. Coach had a damn good idea of who it was. But the kid was the captain of the soccer team. And his family were major donors to the school district. So he was effectively untouchable. Same guy got up on me again at lunch. This part was a regular occurrence. Asking me why I was still in my gym clothes, with that sarcastic ass tone that just drip-sided it. And then knocked my lunch all over the floor. I snapped. The last thing I remember was getting up. And the next thing I know, there's busted glass all over the floor around him. According to the school, I hadn't beaten him up, but I had grabbed him by the collar and thrown him hard enough to put him through a double-paned glass door 5 feet away. Keep in mind, I was no bodybuilder. I weighed maybe 150, 5'7", and did almost no exercise. Got off pretty light though. A week of alternative school, which was literally me coming in and doing my homework assignments at night. Take it easy there, Spider-Man. I worked in this rehab/halfway house a few years ago, and this one kid would repeatedly steal other residents' money. I basically caught him in the act and confronted him, and he absolutely flipped. He took out his wallet, ripped up all the money, and threw it into my face. Something changed in that moment and his face was just pure rage. I noped out of there real quick, and he chased me down the stairs, and then outside where he proceeded to scream at the top of his lungs, not saying anything. Just screaming. He eventually walked off, and didn't see him for hours. The next day his counselor asked me what happened, and I told her. Then she proceeds to tell me, "Poor kid, he's just nervous about his court case today." Me, what's the charge? Counselor, assault with a deadly weapon. Thanks for the heads up, 2/10 job would not do again. Edit, his drug of choice was spice, synthetic weed. I've seen people come in on everything. But I gotta say, that stuff will mess people up permanently. I had a job in a place like that for a while. When I took the job they kept telling me that I would be in charge of the house in 6 months if I made it, and I didn't understand why. I lasted about a month. What made you quit? Out at a bar when some guy grabbed the ass of a married woman. She didn't say anything. Just looked across the bar at her husband. A man about 6 feet 8 inches. At least 280 pounds of pure muscle. Like ridiculously big. How the ass grabber remained conscious for the savage beating he received before 5 or 6 people pulled them apart was actually surprising. He landed maybe one hit before he got sent through a table. Lol, I like how the wife communicates everything with one look. Come here, Bane. It happened again. Beating ensues. I first read that as babe. Your way is definitely better. My dad was in traffic once, and he saw a car break down. The guy, wearing a business suit, casually got out of the car, opened the trunk, and got an aluminium baseball bat. He then proceeded to beat the living hit out of the car. Windows, lights, the whole work. Once he was finished, he fished out his briefcase from the now ruined car, ripped off the license plate from the car, then casually/calmly walked to work, we think. Edit 1. Thanks for the gold. Edit 2. This happened in the mid to late 80s. And like a lot of people here, I thought the same thing when I saw the movie with Michael Douglas the first time, although I like the character didn't trash his car before leaving. Right? Car in relatively good shape keeps breaking down. Mechanics keep replacing things but it still sucks and the same phantom issue keeps popping up: low idle, overheating, stalling out, etc. Finally breaks down again, and guy has had it. Calmly smashes windows, mirrors, panels, radiator, rips up seats, and pours water into the gas tank. Leaves to go to work. Calls cops to say he broke down and had to leave vehicle on side of road, but a tow is coming. Acts surprised that vehicle was vandalized. Collect insurance. TL. Doctor. Insurance fraud. Sounds like my experience with my old car. I'm strongly considering driving it onto a tree. Not for insurance fraud, but because I just fucking hate that car with every ounce of my being. It's sitting in my driveway right now, waiting for spring. I can either put new brakes on it and sell it for $1,000, or I can make it die a slow miserable hate-fueled death. I just don't think I can sell it to someone, even after disclosing every issue, with a clear conscience. I will never buy another Chevrolet. I used to work as a private security guard, and one of the most common assignments was working weddings, which was usually a nice change of pace from the usual work sites. So I'm at this wedding, and the two Hispanic families are fairly large, and booze is freely flowing. For the most part they were loud, but there wasn't any trouble. The rest of the reception goes off without much issue aside from me observing the crowd, and I see a guy that looked quite discontent at reception. I figured he wasn't too social. I thought it would mostly be uneventful. Well, I was wrong, as when the time came for the best man to give a speech, I saw the guy from earlier come up from his table. He must have been no older than 23 or so, and he looked determined and angry. The bride looks at this guy as she's quite anxious as to what he'll say. This young guy interrupts the best man by taking the mic. He paused for a moment and wipes his eye. I'm thinking great, another emotional speech by a drunk guest. But alas, nope. It was far better. It turns out the guy's a really close friend of the bride and professes his love for her, and that the pregnant bride's child is his. The bride looks mortified, and his emotional speech turns from a drunken profession of love to straight up anger and resentment. He then insults the groom and the groom's family, the father of the bride, the groom, and groom's friends are absolutely livid and ready to beat the living hell out of the guy. But I'll have to hand it to the guy as he was smart, and he had brought his friends, and it looked like the damn Royal Rumble as the men are just brawling, chairs are being thrown. The bride is leaving sobbing, her friends and family in tow. It's just sea of people before the other family members and a few my fellow guards could even get there to even attempt to break up the fight. By then the cops were already there. Quite a few people were arrested. The venue was pretty much trashed. TL. Doctor, a close friend of the bride, professes his love for her. Big fight ensues, resulting in a ruined wedding, and people were arrested. Damn. What a hit show. Did you ever find out if her kid actually was his and not her groom's? PLS, the suspense is killing. I used to work with a very angry dude. Like meds and therapy angry. I never knew for sure, but the rumor was he was bipolar. Usually he would flip out over something stupid. When he had his minor freakouts it would involve cussing and throwing it. One day we had a particularly stressful day on the job. It seemed like nothing we were doing was working out right, and our plans for that day's work had fallen apart. Sprinkle in a few rude customers and a few equipment breakdowns, I knew that this guy was on the verge of breaking. Doomsday, as we called it, had been free of his minor freakouts. We thought that maybe his therapy and meds were working, but it turns out it was just the calm before the storm. One task we did required me and this angry guy to work on something together. The entire time he was talking to himself under his breath and was very short. Like, give me that. Or do this just a few words at a time, and in an angry voice. This wasn't uncommon from him, so I didn't think much of it. I'm really not sure what was the straw that broke the camel's back, but whatever it was opened a floodgate. This guy was in the process of backing up one of our semi-trucks when all of a sudden he just slams on the brakes. All of us kind of stop and look at each other like, oh. He climbs out and slams the door super hard. Then he kicks a pile of rocks next to him. He marches inside the warehouse, and we heard him rummage around the tool cabinet and come back out with a wrench. He proceeds to beat the hit out of the toolbox on the truck. Then he hops back in and continues to back the truck up. We thought his outburst was over, but oh no, that would have been too simple. After he got the truck backed up, we were loading it. He just stood off to the side and watched while occasionally cussing about something or slamming his fist down on the table. All of us were walking on eggshells trying not to set him off. The finally break came out of nowhere. He yelled, "Duck it," and hopped in his pickup and drove off, spinning tires and flooring it. He was gone for no more than 10 minutes and came back like a bat out of hell. He hauled us across our gravel parking lot to the back second warehouse. Me and my friend hopped on the golf cart and took off after him. We found him outside the second warehouse next to a troublesome piece of equipment. At a safe distance we watched as he used a cutting torch, sledgehammer, and other various tools to completely destroy this thing. Once it was down to a pile of scrap metal, he loaded it up part by part into his pickup. He made sure to throw each piece as hard as he could. Sometimes he would burn his hand on a still hot chunk, and he would cuss and walk around while holding his hand in his mouth. The boss had gotten word of what this dude was doing and came over to watch. After he had the metal loaded up, he peeled out, in reverse this time, and was making a beeline for a small pond we had on our campus. Once dangerously close, he slammed on the brakes and all the scraps flew out the back into the pond. He got out to check his work and threw a few pieces that didn't make it into the water as far as he could. Seeming satisfied, he peeled out again and made his way into the warehouse. As in, he drove full speed through the large garage door and left black marks across the floor. We watched from the golf cart as people had to literally jump out of the way. Once back inside the warehouse, he hopped on the forklift and began loading empty pallets into the back of his pickup. Once his pickup was sagging from the weight, he took off again. As he rounded a corner, some of the pallets fell off and he got out. He punched and kicked them as he reloaded them by hand. Then he walked into the warehouse and took 6 ratchet straps and secured the duck out of his load. Then he took off into the sunset. We all just kind of stood in shock for a bit, trying to figure out what the duck had just happened. The boss tried to call him, but he wouldn't answer. After some time we all got back to work and sort of forgot about his freak out as we had a ton of work to do. When the day was wrapping up, this guy was nowhere to be found, and he still wouldn't answer his phone. Me and my friend took off to go look for him. It was a small town, so we hit up the few bars and his house, but couldn't find him. We went to our second location in town and he wasn't there, but deep tire marks and the lack of pallets told us he had been there at some point. This location was unmanned, unless we needed it, so no one had been around to see if he was there. An idea struck us. Maybe he had gone to the landfill to throw away the pallets. We go there, but the main gate was closed. A single employee remained. Since we went there a lot to toss out our own trash, he recognized us. He said something to the effect of, "Are you looking for that angry guy?" We said yes, and he let us in. We drove around the various pits looking for him. We eventually found him in one of the lone back pits. He was tearing apart each pallet nail by nail and throwing them into a pile of more pallets. We stood and watched for a bit, and then he said in a really pissed off tone, "Are you just going to stand and watch, or are you going to help?" So we grabbed what tools he had and we helped tear apart the last few pallets. After we were done, he took off like a bat out of hell again. After that day he never mentioned it again, and the boss sat him down for a long talk. The boss told him he needed to take a few days off and think long and hard if this job was for him. The boss also upped his allowance for healthcare under the condition he would use it for mental health care. As far as I know, he enrolled in an intense angry management course and got on some stronger meds. He still had his minor freakouts from time to time, but nothing like that. I haven't worked at that place in years, but from what I hear he is doing much better. We still have no clue what caused him to snap and why on earth he decided to do the things he did. I will give props to the boss for not just firing him on the spot and giving him a second chance and giving him help. He was easily the most productive employee, so that was probably a factor. Holy hit, your boss is incredible. You marry that boss right now. Here today. You understand me? It's been years since I've worked at that company, but he has easily been the best boss I've had. He paid a high schooler / college student working a summer job well over minimum wage, and he still contacts me every spring asking if I'll be back, and he's offered me a full-time job twice. If the job wasn't in my hitty hometown and I hadn't fallen in love with the medical field, I would go back in a heartbeat. There was a kid at school named Davis. There was another kid named Blake. Davis was big. Blake was not. Blake liked to jump on Davis' back, and Davis would always swing him off in a playful way. One day, Blake jumped on Davis' back as usual and latched on. Davis snapped. He screamed "Blark" as he grabbed Blake by his hands and aggressively flipped him over his head and slammed him onto the pavement. Blake was stunned. and his attempt to stand back up was fruitless as Davis began to repeatedly and ruthlessly kick Blake while he was down. We all just watched. We were in shock. We didn't help. We just watched. Eventually, a teacher stopped the beating. Davis got suspended. And Blake, somehow, ended up being okay. They were friends again the next week. I love happy endings. I love fruit. You single? Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.